The stage was set for what promised to be a dramatic showdown. In the heart of Manhattan, under the blinding glare of studio lights, a liberal TV host, known for his sharp tongue and unrelenting style, sat poised to unravel a narrative he'd carefully rehearsed. His target? Melania Trump, the enigmatic former First Lady, whose elegance and quiet demeanor often masked a steely resolve few dared to test. The host had a plan. Provocative questions about her marriage, her feelings for Donald Trump, and the life they'd built together. Questions designed to provoke, to expose, to trap. He expected her to falter, to shrink under the scrutiny of his seasoned tactics. What he didn't anticipate was that Melania, with a single breathtaking response, would turn the tables in a way that would echo far beyond the studio walls. Before we plunge into this electrifying tale, let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from? Now, let's set the scene. Imagine a sleek, modern television studio buzzing with anticipation. The air hums with the low murmur of a live audience settling into their cushioned seats, their eyes darting between the polished set and the figure at its center. The cameras, perched like silent sentinels, capture every angle of the brightly lit stage, where sleek black panels and a towering cityscape backdrop frame the scene. At the heart of it all sits Melania Trump, a vision of poised sophistication. She wears a pristine white dress that clings softly to her frame, its clean lines accentuating her statuesque grace. A garment that seems to glow under the lights, reflecting her calm, unshakable presence. Her dark hair falls in gentle waves, framing a face that betrays nothing of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She crosses her legs at the ankles, a subtle gesture honed by years in the public eye, her posture impeccable yet relaxed. A woman who has faced the world's gaze and emerged stronger for it. Across from her, the host adjusts his tie, his practiced smile stretching wide, but never quite reaching his sharp, calculating eyes. He's a man in his late 40s, with slicked back hair and a tailored suit that screams confidence. A veteran of the media circuit known for dismantling conservative guests with a blend of charm and biting skepticism. His reputation precedes him, a master of the gotcha moment, a predator of the airwaves who thrives on discomfort. Tonight, he's certain he's about to claim another victory. The audience, mostly his regular viewers, a mix of curious onlookers and loyal fans, shifts in their seats, sensing the tension that hangs like static in the air. They've seen this dance before. The host lures his prey with pleasantries, then strikes with precision. But tonight, something feels different. There's an undercurrent, a whisper of unpredictability, as if the very atmosphere knows a storm is about to break. The interview begins innocuously enough. Mrs. Trump, thank you for joining us today, the host says, his voice smooth as polished glass, though a faint trace of condescension lingers beneath the surface. Melania nods, her slight smile unwavering, a shield against the subtle jab she's already detected. It's my pleasure, she replies, her Slovenian accent softening the edges of her words, lending them a warmth that contrasts with the sterile studio glow. For the first few minutes, the exchange follows a predictable rhythm, standard fare for a high-profile guest. He asks about her Be Best initiative, her work with children, and her charitable endeavors. Melania lights up at the topic, her passion evident as she leans forward slightly, her hands clasped delicately in her lap. I believe every child deserves a chance to thrive, she says, her voice steady and earnest. When I started Be Best, I wanted to focus on their well-being, on cyberbullying prevention, on giving them tools to grow strong and confident. When we invest in our children, we invest in America's future. Her words carry a quiet conviction, and the audience responds instinctively. Nods ripple through the crowd, followed by a smattering of spontaneous applause. For a moment, it's clear she's not just a figurehead, but a woman who's poured her heart into this cause. There's a flicker of something genuine in her eyes, perhaps the memory of a child she's met along the way, a letter from a struggling parent, a small victory that keeps her going. But the host, sensing the room warming to her, shifts his weight in his chair, his smile tightening. He's not here for feel-good stories. He's here to dig deeper. "That's fascinating," he interjects, his tone suggesting the opposite. A practiced skepticism that's become his trademark. "But some critics have questioned the sincerity of your philanthropy. They argue it's more about polishing an image than making a real impact." The jab lands like a pebble tossed into still water, ripples of unease spreading through the audience. Melania's expression doesn't falter, but those who know her might catch the faint steel that enters her gaze, a glint of resolve beneath her composed exterior. She tilts her head slightly, as if sizing him up, then responds with measured precision. "Those who question sincerity often reveal more about themselves than about others," she says, her voice cool but edged with purpose. "The children and families we've helped, their stories, their gratitude, those speak louder than any critic's words." The host's lips twitch, an almost imperceptible sign he's been thrown off script. He shuffles his note cards, a nervous tick betraying his frustration. The audience senses it too. A murmur of conversation swells, a few heads tilt in knowing glances. This isn't unfolding as he'd planned. Melania, far from rattled, sits with the quiet strength of someone who's weathered far worse than a TV host's barbs. She's no stranger to scrutiny. Years as a model, a businesswoman, and a first lady have forged her into someone who bends but never breaks. Born in Novo Mesto, Slovenia, she'd carved her own path long before the Trump name entered her life. Mastering multiple languages, building a successful modeling career, navigating the cutthroat world of fashion with discipline and grit. That resilience, often overlooked, is her armor now. Undeterred, the host presses forward, his voice taking on a bolder edge as he pivots to her role as First Lady. And the real interrogation begins. "You've had quite a journey," he says, leaning forward with what he likely thinks is a look of sincere curiosity. "From Slovenia to the White House. That must have been challenging." The word challenging lingers, heavy with insinuation, a baited hook dangling in the air. Melania meets his gaze evenly. "Every journey has its challenges," she replies, her tone steady as granite. "But America is a land of opportunities. I've been blessed to live the American dream." She pauses, then adds with quiet force, "And I've worked hard for everything I've achieved." The host seizes the opening, his smile sharpening. "Indeed. But surely being married to Donald Trump opened doors that wouldn't have been available otherwise." The audience stirs, a low hum of anticipation rising as the question cuts closer to the bone. Melania's expression remains serene, but something flashes in her eyes, not anger, but a fierce determination that seems to catch the light. "My husband and I built our life together," she states, her voice firm yet melodic. "Each of us brought our own strengths to our partnership." The word partnership hangs between them, a deliberate choice that the host pounces on like a cat spotting prey. "Partnership," he repeats, his tone dripping with skepticism. "That's an interesting choice of words. Some might call it more of a business arrangement." The temperature in the room seems to plummet, a chill settling over the audience as they shift uncomfortably, aware they're witnessing a line being crossed. Melania uncrosses and recrosses her ankles, the only visible sign of movement. But her gaze locks onto the host, unwavering. "You know," she begins, her voice gaining a new edge, a quiet steel beneath its graceful cadence. "I find it fascinating how some claim to champion women's independence, yet question every choice a strong woman makes. Perhaps we should discuss why that is." The host blinks, caught off guard by the deft parry. His usual playbook, provoke, fluster, dominate, is unraveling before his eyes. The audience senses it too. A few nervous chuckles ripple through the crowd, breaking the tension momentarily. He could back down, pivot to safer ground. But instead, he doubles down. A choice he'll soon regret. "So let's talk about your relationship with Donald Trump," he says, abandoning any pretense of subtlety. "How would you describe your marriage? Someone constantly in the spotlight, surrounded by controversy? How do you navigate that?" Melania's response comes like a calm tide, steady and unyielding. "My husband is a man of action and conviction. When you stand for something, controversy follows. We knew this path wouldn't be easy, but we walk it together." The host latches onto the word together, his skepticism sharpening. "Together," he echoes. "But isn't it difficult being married to someone so polarizing? Someone who attracts so much criticism?" Melania tilts her head slightly, her accent growing more pronounced as she leans into her reply. "You seem very focused on the negatives. Let me tell you what the media doesn't show. A man who wakes up every day thinking about how to make this country better. A father who always made time for his children despite his schedule. A husband who values loyalty and family above all else." The host shifts in his seat, his frustration palpable as her words weave a portrait far removed from the caricature he'd hoped to paint. The audience, once a neutral sea, begins to ripple with nods of approval, a few even exchanging whispers of admiration. Melania's not just defending her husband, she's revealing a side of herself, a woman whose quiet demeanor belies a fierce loyalty and unshakable belief in the man she chose. But the host, sensing the room slipping from his grasp, adjusts his tactic, his next question cloaked in a sympathetic smile that feels as hollow as it looks. "You've accomplished so much on your own. Your modeling career, your business ventures. Don't you ever feel overshadowed by Donald's larger-than-life personality?" Melania's slight smile takes on an amused edge, as if she's seen this move a dozen times before. "You know, it's interesting how some confuse support with submission, or strength with dominance. Perhaps that says more about their view of relationships than about mine." The tension in the studio thickens, a palpable electricity crackling as the host realizes his usual traps are failing. His expression hardens, his voice sharpening as he prepares to push further, determined to reclaim control. Little does he know, he's walking deeper into a snare of his own making. One that Melania, with her quiet grace and unyielding resolve, is about to spring. The studio lights seem to burn hotter now, casting long shadows across the set as the host presses forward, his tone laced with a subtle condescension he can no longer mask. "Your success as a model is well documented," he begins, leaning back in his chair as if to feign casual interest. "It must have been quite a transition, going from the fashion world to politics." His words drip with an unspoken implication that her past somehow disqualifies her present, that her journey lacks legitimacy. Melania's posture remains impeccable, her hands resting lightly in her lap, but there's a flicker of something in her eyes, a quiet defiance honed by years of proving herself in unforgiving arenas. Every phase of life brings its own challenges and rewards, she replies, her voice cool and deliberate, each word chosen with care. The fashion industry taught me discipline, professionalism, skills that serve me well in any role. I've always believed in growing, learning, adapting. Her response is a masterclass in composure, a subtle reminder of the resilience that carried her from a small Slovenian town to the catwalks of Milan and Paris, and eventually to the White House. She'd navigated the ruthless world of high fashion, enduring long hours, relentless criticism, and the constant pressure to reinvent herself, all while building a life on her own terms. That strength, often underestimated, is her foundation now. The host, undeterred, presses harder, his smile tightening into something more predatory. But surely the contrast must be jarring, from modeling in Europe to becoming First Lady of the United States. That's quite a leap. His emphasis on leap hangs in the air, a thinly veiled challenge to her credibility. Melania's eyes narrow almost imperceptibly, a glint of steel beneath her serene facade. You seem very focused on my past career, she counters, her voice carrying a hint of challenge that cuts through the studio's hum. Should we discuss your journey to this chair? Or is scrutiny only interesting when directed at others? A ripple of nervous laughter spreads through the audience, a few heads nodding in approval as the host's smile falters, his confidence momentarily shaken. He recovers quickly, though, his tone sharpening as he pivots back to his target. I'm simply trying to understand the dynamics of your relationship, he says, his words clipped. After all, you moved in very different circles before meeting Donald. The implication is clear. He's painting her as an outsider, a woman who stumbled into power rather than earned it. Melania tilts her head slightly, her accent adding a melodic edge to her response. Different circles? She repeats, her voice steady but laced with quiet fire. I was a successful businesswoman who spoke 5 languages and had traveled the world. I met Donald as an equal, not as someone looking for a step up. The audience stirs, a low murmur of agreement rising as her words sink in. She's not just defending herself, she's dismantling the narrative he's trying to construct, brick by brick. Melania Trump, born Melania Knavs, had been more than a model. She'd been a savvy entrepreneur, a woman who'd turned down countless paths to forge her own. Her multilingual fluency, Slovenian, English, French, Serbian, German, had opened doors across continents, her sharp mind and relentless work ethic earning her a place among the elite long before she'd met Donald Trump at a New York fashion event in 1998. That meeting hadn't been a transaction. It had been a collision of 2 ambitious souls, each recognizing in the other a kindred spirit. The host's professional veneer begins to crack, his next words spilling out with a sharpness he can't quite contain. But you must admit, marrying Donald Trump changed your life dramatically. The wealth, the influence, the power. He leans forward, his eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who thinks he's landed a killing blow. Melania interrupts before he can finish, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through his momentum like a blade. I think you're about to cross a line you might regret, she says, her gaze locking onto his. But please, continue. I'm curious to see where this goes. The studio falls silent, so quiet you can hear the faint hum of the cameras and the rustle of the host's note cards as he grips them tighter. The audience holds its breath, sensing a shift in the power dynamic, a moment where the hunter becomes the hunted. The host, momentarily thrown by her unflinching challenge, makes a fatal misstep. Let me be direct then, he says, any trace of courtesy evaporating as his voice hardens. Would you even be with Donald if he wasn't wealthy? If he was just a regular businessman struggling to make ends meet? The question lands like a thunderclap, audacious even for a host known for pushing boundaries. A collective gasp ripples through the audience, a few hands flying to mouths in shock. This isn't just provocative, it's personal, a deliberate attempt to strip her down to a stereotype. But Melania doesn't flinch. Instead, a small, almost pitying smile curves her lips, a smile that carries the weight of 1,000 battles won. She adjusts her posture slightly, her white dress catching the light as she leans forward just enough to command the room. "You know," she begins, her voice soft but resonant, filling the studio with a quiet strength that seems to reverberate off the walls. "I've been asked this question before, though usually not so crudely, and it always reveals the same thing: how little people understand about love, commitment, and values." The host opens his mouth to interject, but she raises a hand subtly, silencing him without breaking her stride. "I had my own successful career," she continues, her tone growing more passionate yet retaining its elegant precision. "I was financially independent. I could have chosen any path, any life I wanted. But I chose Donald, not his wealth, not his status, but the man himself." The audience leans in, captivated by the shift in her demeanor. This isn't just a defense, it's a revelation. "Let me tell you something about Donald Trump that you won't hear in the media," she says, her eyes never leaving the host's now uncertain gaze. "When we first met, do you know what impressed me most? It wasn't his buildings or his business empire. It was how he spoke about his children, how his eyes lit up when he talked about their achievements, how he taught them the value of hard work and integrity." The host shifts uncomfortably, his chair creaking faintly as Melania's words paint a picture far removed from the brash tycoon of tabloid lore. Donald Trump, in her telling, is a man shaped by more than ambition. A father who'd sat at the kitchen table with Ivanka, Don Jr., E and Eric, instilling lessons of resilience. A partner who'd seen in Melania not just beauty, but a mind as sharp as his own. "You see," she continues, her voice rising with quiet conviction, "wealth can buy comfort, but it can't buy character. It can't buy the dedication I've witnessed as Donald worked tirelessly for this country. It can't buy the love I've seen him show his family, his children, and yes, this nation." She pauses, letting her words settle like a melody lingering in the air, and the audience responds. A wave of nods, a few soft murmurs of agreement breaking the silence. "So, to answer your question," she says, her gaze piercing through the host's faltering bravado, "yes, I would be with Donald if he had nothing. Because what I love about him has nothing to do with his bank account and everything to do with his heart." The room erupts in spontaneous applause, a thunderous swell that catches even the camera crew off guard. Some nod in quiet approval, their professional detachment cracking. The host, visibly deflated, shuffles his notes, his earlier smugness dissolving into something akin to desperation. He tries to regain footing. "But you have to admit," he stammers, "your lifestyle, the luxury, the privileges, they must play some role in your relationship." Melania tilts her head, her smile carrying a gentle rebuke. "You seem very fixated on material things," she observes, her tone measured but pointed. "Is it so hard to believe that two people might share deeper values? That they might build a life together based on mutual respect, shared dreams, and genuine love?" The host's facade crumbles further, his voice betraying a hint of frustration. "I'm just trying to understand." "No," Melania cuts in, her voice firm but controlled. "You're trying to push a narrative. You want to paint me as someone who married for money, because that's easier than accepting that a strong, independent woman might choose to stand by her husband out of love and conviction. She straightens in her chair, her presence filling the room like a quiet storm. Let me tell you what luxury really means to me, she says, her accent lending a rhythmic cadence to her words. Luxury is having a partner who supports your dreams while pursuing his own. It's having someone who, despite all the attacks and criticism, never wavers from his principles. It's watching your husband work tirelessly for a country he deeply loves. The audience breaks into applause again, louder this time, several people rising to their feet. The host fidgets with his notes, his eyes darting off stage as if praying for a reprieve. But there's no escape from the moment he's created, and the one Melania has seized. The studio vibrates with the energy of the crowd's applause, a wave of sound that crashes over the set and leaves the host visibly rattled. His once confident demeanor has eroded, replaced by a flicker of unease as he clutches his note cards like a lifeline. Melania, by contrast, sits as composed as ever, her white dress catching the light in a way that makes her seem almost luminous, a beacon of calm amid the storm she's unleashed. The audience, initially a mix of skeptics and curious onlookers, is now firmly in her corner, their faces alight with admiration for the woman who's turned a hostile interrogation into a testament of strength and loyalty. But Melania isn't finished. As the clapping subsides, she leans forward slightly, her voice taking on a warmth that contrasts sharply with the host's cold, faltering skepticism. You know what I find interesting? She says, her tone gentle yet piercing, cutting through the lingering hum of the room. How quick some people are to judge a marriage they know nothing about. How eager they are to reduce a complex, loving relationship to something transactional. Perhaps that says more about their values than mine. The words land like a quiet thunderbolt, and the host's face flushes slightly, a rare crack in his polished exterior. He glances at his notes, scrambling for a new angle, but the shift in the room's energy is undeniable. The audience, once content to watch a takedown, now hangs on Melania's every word, captivated by the glimpse she's offering into a life they've only seen through distorted headlines. Since you're so interested in my marriage, she continues, her composure unwavering, let me tell you about the Donald Trump I know. Her voice softens, a trace of tenderness threading through her steady cadence as she begins to paint a portrait far removed from the brash figure of public law. He's the man who sits up late at night, reading letters from Americans struggling to make ends meet. Letters from parents who've lost jobs, from veterans who feel forgotten, from children who just want a better future. He reads every one, and I've seen the way his brow furrows, the way he scribbles notes to follow up, because he cares more than people realize. The studio falls into a reverent silence, the audience transfixed as she continues. He's the husband who still brings me coffee in the morning, no matter what crisis he's facing. Black, no sugar, just the way I like it, with a quiet smile that says more than words ever could. He's the father who taught his children that their name isn't about wealth or status. It's about integrity, hard work, and keeping your word. Her eyes, usually so guarded, soften with the weight of memory. Perhaps a fleeting image of Donald at home, tie loosened, laughing with Barron over a school project, or counseling Ivanka through a tough decision with the patience of a man who's faced his own share of battles. These are the things that matter, she says, her voice rising with quiet conviction. These are the reasons I stand by him. She leans forward slightly, her gaze locking onto the host's now uncertain eyes. You see, when the cameras are off, when there's no audience, no press, that's when you see a person's true character. And Donald's character has never wavered, whether dealing with success or challenges. His dedication to his family and this country remains constant. The host, visibly uncomfortable, attempts to interject, his voice a weak shadow of its earlier bravado. But surely— No, Melania cuts in firmly, her tone brooking no interruption. Let me finish. The audience leans in, hanging on her words as she delivers her rebuttal with the precision of a seasoned debater. You asked about money, about wealth, she says, her accent lending a rhythmic weight to her speech. But true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in loyalty, in dedication, in the courage to stand up for what you believe in, despite constant criticism. By those measures, my husband is the richest man I know. The room erupts in applause again, a thunderous roar that shakes the set. Several audience members stand, their hands clapping with a fervor that catches even the sound crew off guard. The host glances off stage, his expression a mix of desperation and disbelief, perhaps hoping for a commercial break to salvage his crumbling strategy. But there's no reprieve. Not tonight. When Donald and I first met, Melania continues, her voice carrying a warmth that fills the studio like sunlight breaking through clouds. He asked about my dreams, not my bank account. He wanted to know my thoughts, not my dress size. That's the man I married. Someone who sees beyond the surface, who values substance over status. She straightens in her chair, her eyes meeting the host's faltering gaze with a quiet intensity. You asked earlier if I would stay with Donald without his wealth. Let me be clear. I stay with Donald because of who he is, not what he has. I've seen him face unprecedented attacks with unwavering courage. I've watched him sacrifice comfort and convenience to fight for what he believes is right for America. The host, grasping at straws, attempts one last weak defense. But the public perception, Melania interrupts smoothly, her voice a calm tide washing over his floundering words, is shaped by people like you, who can't seem to understand that a woman might choose her partner based on character rather than currency, who can't grasp that real love isn't about profit and loss statements. Her tone softens, taking on a gentle but firm resonance that commands the room. You know what Donald said to me during one of our most challenging times? He said, Melania, they can take everything we own, but they can't take our love for each other or this country. That's the man I married. That's the man I love. The studio explodes in thunderous applause, a standing ovation that reverberates off the walls and leaves the host visibly deflated. Even some of the camera crew nod in quiet approval, their stoic professionalism giving way to the moment's raw power. The host shuffles his notes one last time, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, reduced to a subdued murmur. Well, that's certainly a different perspective than what's often portrayed in the media, he says, the words sounding hollow against the weight of what's just transpired. Melania responds with a quiet confidence that cuts through the noise. Perhaps that's because some in the media are more interested in creating narratives than understanding truth. They prefer simple stereotypes over complex realities. She glances at the audience, many of whom remain on their feet, their faces a mix of awe and respect. You know what surprised me most about becoming First Lady? She continues, her voice carrying a reflective warmth. Not the criticism. I expected that. What surprised me was how many Americans saw through the noise and understood what Donald and I have always known. That love, loyalty, and dedication to service are what truly matter. The studio remains transfixed as she delivers her final thoughts, her words a quiet crescendo that lingers in the air. My husband isn't perfect. None of us are. But he's a man who loves his family and his country with everything he has. And at the end of the day, isn't that what really counts? The host merely nods, any trace of his earlier smugness erased, his silence an unspoken concession. It's clear to everyone in the room. His attempted takedown has backfired spectacularly, transforming into a powerful testament to love and commitment. Melania Trump, often reduced to a glamorous silhouette in the public eye, has revealed a depth few anticipated. A woman whose quiet grace masks a fierce resolve, whose loyalty is forged in the fires of adversity. The audience, now wholly hers, watches in reverent silence as the cameras zoom in, capturing the moment for posterity. Some had thought they had Melania figured out, saw the elegance, the wealth, the lifestyle, and convinced themselves that was the whole story. But tonight, she's shown something far more valuable than any material possession: the power of true love and unwavering loyalty. In a world where relationships often feel disposable and marriages of convenience dominate the headlines, Melania Trump has offered a reminder of what real commitment looks like. A bond built on mutual respect, shared values, and a deep, abiding understanding. What began as an attempt to embarrass her has morphed into a masterclass in grace under pressure, a poignant lesson in what truly matters. Not the size of your bank account, but the strength of your character. Before we close this chapter, take a moment to like this story and subscribe for more. Until next time, thanks for joining me on this unforgettable journey.